Welcome. This is David Boles, Human Meme. Today's topic, becoming a Boss Radio Jock. Have you heard of Boss Radio before? What about a Boss Jock? In the 1960s, popular music on the radio, hit songs, would be played in heavy rotation with no dead space, silence, or talking by the radio DJ without a song ending or starting underneath the speaking. Heavy rotation of a song meant you might hear a hit song maybe 2 or even 3 times an hour. And the DJs who hosted Boss Radio were called Boss Jocks, short for disc jockey, when actual records were actually played on the air on the radio. I was raised on radio in Lincoln, Nebraska, and you may read my bolesblogs.com article about being raised on radio by going to bolesblogs.com and doing a search. I started working at KFOR Radio 1240 and KFRX 103. X103. At age 13, I was the host of my own weekly radio show, an interview program called Unique Youth. And I also did air shifts, and I worked on any other odd jobs that needed to be done around the station. Saturdays in the fall in Lincoln, Nebraska were big football broadcast days. So I'd do an overnight shift Friday night. Then I'd get off the air at 6 a.m. Saturday. I would sleep for about 4 hours on a couch in the station. And then I was up and back working at the station at 10 a.m. to help the broadcast of the game. Then I'd answer the phones at night. People in those days would call the radio station to get scores of all the college football games, so they could figure out if they won their bet or not. Some people would call in just to be funny. Slippery Rock was a big laugh getter, I guess, as people calling in would want to know if Slippery Rock won or lost that day. Then, at midnight, I'd go back on the air for another 6 hours, finish at 6 a.m., and then go home and collapse from being awake and working for 2 days straight. And yes, that schedule was a killer. One day during the week, I had dental surgery to remove 4 wisdom teeth all at the same time. I was bloody, and I was on codeine. And my radio boss called me and told me I had to work that night to fill in overnight. I could barely speak. He said he'd have the morning guy come in an hour early at 5 a.m., and I could do the 12 to 5 a.m. shift. I told my boss I didn't think I would be able to even drive down to the station, let alone do an overnight air shift, while tripping on codeine. And I was told, in stern terms, that this is the nature of part-time. And the threat was clear. Either I did the shift, or he had to do the shift. And if he had to do the shift, I was fired. I showed up. Fun days, those. Now, radio is and never was a high-paying business. Sure, there are national exceptions like Rush Limbaugh and Paul Harvey in his time and Howard Stern now, who all made a killing in radio. But for the average person, there's no money there. A long-time local radio star and a friend of mine quit his 30-year run as the #1 morning show in the market because he had redlined. No raises, no more money, no profit sharing. He quit radio to help homeless people. And he doubled his money. Like adjuncts make up the majority of teachers at a university, the part-time radio staff makes up a lot of the on-air talent for any radio station. Part-time announcers, like I was, tend to be young and inexperienced, or they are rather old and lost and sort of useless because they aren't good enough to get a full-time radio gig somewhere else. And you don't make a killing part-time on the air, on the radio. You make minimum wage. That's the sort of job radio was, and probably still is, in a non-union shop, a small market like Lincoln, Nebraska. So, older part-timers tend to come and go. They often don't stay around long because they are crazy and unreliable. Or they are able to move up to a larger market to get a full-time gig. Or maybe they move across town just because they can get a little bit more than minimum wage. I loved being a radio part-timer and working with other part-timers my age and older because the experiences were wide and varied. The full-time on-air staff tended to be local and sane. And where is the fun in that? One particular part-timer, let's call him Brad, started young like me many years ago, and he'd worked full-time gigs in Omaha and Chicago, and he was back in Lincoln for a bit, slightly defeated, and he needed some extra income. So Brad decided to take a part-time gig on our station to put some quick cash in his pocket for the Christmas season. And Brad was, lovingly, insane. Brad had a wild but sparse beard that sort of took over his face, and his eyes were a little bit crazy. But Brad had a great voice. Not a traditional, deep, booming voice, but a voice you would hear and never forget. Brad had a lovely wife, and he lived near me, so he often gave me rides home in his brown Camaro. And if anyone on the street tried to pass us in his Camaro, Brad would speed up, take the lead, and cry out the window, "Nobody beats a Camaro!" Then, as Brad often did in times of boredom, stress, and general states of laissez-faire, he would pound his fist on the steering wheel and wail exactly 10 times. "In the name of Jesus Christ, Satan, get out of my life!" Brad loved Boss Radio. And, other than 1290 Coil Radio in Omaha, Nebraska, Omaha's original rocker, you really didn't put on the Boss Jock personality at that time on our station. A Boss Jock was high energy, you had a wild tone, and some reverb. And you'd push the songs forward. And because of all that, Boss Radio was pretty much dead by the mid-1980s. The death of Boss Radio didn't stop Brad, though. He'd do Boss Radio on the air, while still sort of fitting into the adult contemporary style of the mainline radio station in Lincoln, Nebraska. And Brad was willing to teach me, at age 13, how to become a Boss Radio god. And this was all as he relived his youth in Omaha and Chicago as a boss jock at some of the best stations in the nation. And now you too can be a boss jock, as I share some of the lessons Brad shared with me. Ready? Let's begin. Oh, and I'm not saying any of this is sane, or even workable, or even doable today, or even back then. Just remember, and repeat after Brad, in the name of Jesus Christ, Satan, get out of my life. Now, onward. The first thing you have to do to be a boss jock is to get just a little bit of reverb on your voice. The old Boss radio stations did that automatically for all of their announcers. But that reverb is harder to do on a non-Boss radio station. And so Brad would sometimes bring his own effects bay, or if he was more desperate, he'd set up a little bit of feedback, something like this, that would sort of air live and sort of make a terrible sound, like he was being a boss, but it really only sounded like a mistake. Nobody wants to hear that kind of feedback on the air. Next, you need some heavy compression on your voice. Again, the Boss radio stations did this for every announcer by default, and most radio stations have some sort of compression. But Brad couldn't really get the compression to work, the heavy compression, on his own as an announcer at our station. Compression rounds out the sound and makes everything more listenable in a stricter range of volume and softness. And compression works especially well on AM radio. Compression is a big part of the Chicago sound of modern AM radio in the Windy City, even today. Big energy was important. We'll use Boles radio instead of call signs in this tutorial. Good schmorgens, Mr. Morgans. This is Boles Radio, live on a Monday. Sunny, 70, picnic, Boles Radio. Yes, shouting was a big part of it. And so was speaking fast. And in Boss Radio, music was everything. And for this podcast, I licensed a couple of songs here from Premium Beats in Canada, so I can try to better show you the complexity of Brad's Boss Radio lessons. First was the Kiss and Tell. Soft voice, soft intro. You give the call sign, the name of the song hits. Boles Radio. Now, you ain't gonna get away. Now, yes, we have some dead air here in these examples as I teach you these Boss Jock lessons, and that's by design so you can hear precisely how the technique works. Now, if we were truly on the air, we'd be coming out of a song and going right back into a new one. Next, we have Kiss and Blow. Yes, that's what Brad called it. In the name of Jesus Christ. First, just the call sign, straight into the song. Soft, kiss, sexy, blow. Brad's words, not mine. Boles Radio. Now, one of the hallmarks of Boss Radio was talking up a song intro. That means no dead air. You transition from one song to another without a break in the beats. And you had to be very careful, though, not to talk over the singer when the singer started singing. That was imperative. So many Boss Jocks bumped into the vocal by mistake, and it sounded terrible. And Brad called that stomping the intro. Welcome to Boles Radio. I'm David W. Boles, on the air with you, and we have rain and a threat of ice in the forecast. And that sort of stomping over a song intro is what started the rebellion against the Boss Radio movement. Research showed people wanted to hear their songs without people talking over their songs. Show and tell was Brad's next exquisite lesson. You show who you are, and you tell the station name and the title of the song. David Boles, live on Boles Radio. This is Snake Pit. Finally, Brad taught me to lay the outro, meaning, in the name of, to give the station call sign and ID yourself as a song was ending. Boles Radio. I'm David Boles, wishing you a fair good night. And there you have it. Now you know how to be a Boss Radio jock. Oh, and there were a few other rules to follow. Always give the time digitally. It's 5:45 p.m. And never, it's 6:15. I'm not sure why digital is better than 6:30, but mine is not to question, only to follow and learn. As well, back then, you always had to give the state of the sky and the temperature as often as possible. Nebraska is, was, and shall always be a weather wonder-obsessed state because of the farm economy. And people always want to know if it's going to rain or be cloudy or windy. And even though we'd mention the weather 10 times an hour, people would still call us up on the phone in the old days and ask us for the weather forecast. And that's that. Now you too are a Boss Radio jock. Rock on as you kiss and blow. Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.